A no commentary walkthrough is available below. Bloodborne. It's one of the most popular games to release on the PS4 and possibly last year, and since then fans have been begging for a remaster, a sequel, or a PC release. But until then, other developers are attempting to fill that hole. Here comes Lies of P, a retelling of the classic Pinocchio fairy tale with a heavy focus on dark fantasy and steampunk. The developers at NeoWiz recently released a new demo that highlights many of these systems and mechanics players will engage with this title. I 100% the demo, and here's my takes on the game. The story opens up with a puppet made by Geppetto springing to life as a blue butterfly comes into the puppet. The woman named Sophia tells you that you need to head to the Hotel of Krat to locate her. You next pick up a lantern and choose your weapon. You have a choice between light, medium, or heavy before exiting the train, and unfortunately you cannot swap out this weapon, so make sure you pick carefully. Once you enter the world, this is the basic Souls-like system that a lot of us are familiar with. You have a stamina meter for running and attacking, parrying is available, blocking absorbs a portion of the damage which you can regain by attacking right after based on how much damage was lost, similar to Bloodborne, and as far as I can tell there's no shielding system, but maybe that might change in the future. If you've played any FromSoft game, you'll basically grasp the mechanics of this game very quickly. You kill enemies, absorb their souls, there are bonfires, which we'll get into later, but overall it plays more or less like Bloodborne. The enemies you'll face at the start are deranged puppets who have killed the people in the city of Krat, where the game takes place. Bodies are littered everywhere. I even found a few of children. I'm not really sure, but at the same time you see that these developers are not sugarcoating anything. The amount of damage done to this world is extremely violent, and they do an incredible job of setting it up. Everything has this Victorian steampunk design to it, along with posters that further flesh out the environment, showcasing what these puppets were used for and how they are incorporated into the environment. Occasionally, you'll come across collectibles that highlight the world and people attempting to escape this nightmare while fleshing out what happened prior to the events of what you're dealing with right now. The first set of enemies is nothing special. Service workers using regular items such as stop signs and candelabras as weapons. Striking the enemies creating nice sense of feedback as metal slices through metal, with oil from the robots spilling everywhere and dousing the player in its thick black viscous material. If you're hit, you can heal yourself using a battery of limited charges. When depleted, you can earn a single charge back by attacking enemies, but this takes a long time. But nevertheless, I think it's a nice touch in ensuring that the players can keep going, even if they're out of healing items. The final enemy in the area is a police officer, and the fight is definitely intense in comparison to the other fights leading up to this fight. Here you'll learn the groggy stage, where an enemy takes enough damage they can be taken down to a fatal attack. You can trigger a fatal attack by hitting the enemy in the back as well, but only when they're not in combat. There's no backstab locking out system in this game. And if you engage a fatal attack during combat, you have to do it from the front, not from the back, which is a little strange, but I'm not a game developer, so maybe there's a reason behind this. With the key obtained, you can now enter the city. Here we are introduced to this world's version of the bonfire called the Stargazer. Like the bonfire, you can use this to restore healing items, level up for now, later that will change, and it will reset enemies within the area. Killing enemies and using specific leveling items earns you ergo that you can use to increase your character statistics. Now, the statistics are kind of labeled in a very different way that complement the world. I kind of wish it was basic with health, damage, and other systems, but you're going to have to get used to what each one of these things state. I mean, they do have a basic leveling up chart that showcases what does what, but I still would have preferred some basic language. That's just me. It's up to preference. Here we get a first taste of how the city has fallen. The entire landscape is covered with bodies and worn carriages. Even the horses were not spared in the puppets' massacre, which is called the puppets' frenzy. Here we are introduced to the puppet dogs and ranged attackers, puppets with guns. By the time you get here, you'll be introduced to the weapon durability system and repair system. And yes, the weapon durability system is basically what you would expect. The more you use a weapon, the more it gets worn, and if it's broken, you cannot use it anymore. It's completely gone. But you can repair it using this type of grinding system. It's kind of annoying, but at the same time, honestly, I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I feel like it's an unnecessary mechanic. Another new mechanic that you will be introduced to is Fable Arts. These are deadly attacks that require a charge in order for you to use them that you get from attacking enemies. You can link 2 Fable Arts, one from the hilt of the weapon that offers a status buff, and one that's engaged with the weapon's blade, which is a devastating attack that requires all 3 charges. It's also here that you are introduced to unblockable attacks where the enemies flash red and you have to dodge instead of block. It's nothing that big of a deal. We've all engaged with these types of attacks, but we definitely get an idea of what we are going to deal with for the future. Eventually, we make it to the circus and we meet the merchant.
Got something that might interest you.
No, not that merchant. Some of the people did survive the massacre, but are trapped in the city. This merchant is here to help for a price. Now, it's time for the first of 2 bosses in this demo, the Parade Master. It's a basic fight, but tough nevertheless. You need to watch each attack carefully, and it's here we have to learn how to parry. Since Liza P's dodging system is extremely weak, you cover very little ground, and I always felt like it was underwhelming. Parrying is essential for surviving. As the fight continues, the Parade Master will become more aggressive as his body starts to come apart. An excellent visual design to highlight the growing intensity of the fight, and also if you don't watch the enemy's health meter, this is a great visual indicator of how far you are into the fight. If you die, like with most Souls-like, you'll drop the experience that you've earned and must retrieve it. Unlike other Souls games, if you die at a boss fight, the experience beacon is left outside the boss room, which I think is absolutely terrific. This ensures that if you did get to a boss fight and you've accumulated a lot of experience, you should have the chance to come and retrieve it and level up your character if you get to a level up station. I'll explain that later about the leveling up, but it's a really good idea, and I hope that other Souls-like games will do this. Once you defeat the Parade Master, we can now reach the hotel. Here we find out that puppets cannot lie, and the hotel will not allow puppets inside. However, we can lie, and we pretend to be human, bypassing the security system, which will introduce us that we are different from other puppets. I mean, that was already self-explanatory based that we are the protagonist, but we'll get more information later on. Inside, we meet Sophia at last. She asks us to locate Geppetto and gives us a pocket watch that allows us to teleport back to the hotel. Here we are introduced to another ally, a type of AI companion called Gemini. In addition, you're locked out of the leveling system from the Stargazers moving forward and must return to Sophia to level up, similar to the Fire Shrine Keeper or the doll from Bloodborne. Inside the hotel, we are introduced to 2 more survivors. Antonia, the owner of the hotel, who gives us an outfit. Clothes in Liza P are just cosmetic and don't give you any advantage, so I expect there are going to be a lot of outfit options as you move forward. You can choose your clothing and a mask. Eugenia is the weaponsmith and gives you access to a brand new weapon, a Legion arm. These are special weapons with limited charges, this one being a grapple hook that pulls enemies towards you. Once you run out of charges, you have to return to a Stargazer or the hotel to recharge it. You can also upgrade your weapons here using special crafting items obtained in the game and alter your weapon based on your fighting style. The last ally is a puppet who works at the front desk. Here you learn about the 4 puppet laws, also known as the Grand Covenant, which resembles the laws of robotics. All puppets must obey their creator's commands. Puppets cannot harm humans. Puppets must protect and serve the humans in the city of Krat, and puppets cannot lie. So we now know why we are special, because we can basically break these rules, and we'll slowly break them as we go along in the game. We enter Elysium Boulevard in search of Geppetto to see that Gemini is now in working order and introduces us to a new faction, the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, who destroys a train cart. Now, we don't know much about them, and unfortunately we won't get to know anything about them in this demo, but it's a good indicator of what we're going to face later on. This area houses the most wealthy and elite citizens, and it shows, seeing that the puppets in this area are largely service workers such as butlers and chimney sweeps. And like other Souls-like, you unlock shortcuts as you explore the map to get to areas quicker. As we explore, we gain access to new upgrades. Liza P has 4 slots for parts and 2 ring options. Each upgrade increases your weight, and the heavier you are, the more time it takes for your stamina to recharge. Heading into the next area, we are introduced to 2 new things, the first being optional missions. This one has us attempting to find a child for a woman. The second is that she tells us that there is a disease that's spreading and she's also infected with it, but we'll learn more about this later. Heading into the next area, we find that traps have been placed around the environment that cause shock damage, the first status effect that we are introduced to. If the meter fills, we'll take a burst of damage, and if we do the same to an enemy, it'll do the same. The player is able to imbue their weapons with special status effects, but only for a limited time, either through special items, or I think there's another option, but there's a special item that you obtain that can allow you to temporarily boost your weapon. We finally reach Geppetto's location where we find our first human, at least the first aggressive human, the Mad Donkey. He demands Geppetto come out, and it's clear this guy is out for blood. He calls us the Devil's Puppet and attacks, showing that he knows something that we don't, and he's wielding a giant saw-like weapon. However, unlike the Parade Master, this fight is very straightforward, as he uses the same attack pattern without any increase in aggression, similar to other boss fights that you probably experienced in From Software games like Elden Ring and Dark Souls, where you fought human enemies who just used the same attacks. We finally meet Geppetto, who calls us his son. He doesn't provide us with any answers, but gives us the Mad Donkey's clothing, which is a bit weird since you don't loot it from the corpse, and his corpse is also gone. Either way, he asks us to clear the puppets in the city hall area. Another thing that I noticed that was strange is that we didn't get his weapon. Usually the big enticing factor of killing human enemies is that we get their items, but I would have liked to use the saw blade. Maybe there's a reason behind it and it could be implemented in the final product. Maybe they don't have all the things fixed correctly, and right now that's just a teaser. So I decided to embrace my inner demons and become the Mad Donkey. Clearing out the area reveals new information specifically about the plague. We find this body, which is covered in scales and growing roots, the disease that the woman was talking about. We clear out more of the puppets and find no humans survive, but there is a wooden doll in the body pile. We take it to the woman, who was driven to insanity because of whatever is infecting the people, and we learn that she kind of thinks that this is her child. Now, this is another choice-based system where we can tell her the truth or not, but it's clear there will be consequences to what we do, which I kind of like. The idea of whether you lie and ease her pain, or you tell her the truth and maybe it might drive her over the edge and she becomes increasingly more chaotic. Either way, I kind of like this system. Heading to the city hall, we meet the second and final boss of the demo, but before the fight we can call on help. In exchange for a rare item, we can call on a specter to help in the fight. However, this is a limited charge, which I don't think should be an option. I think that what made optional help such an incredible system in the Souls-like franchise Dark Souls and Bloodborne is that it was a personal preference for the player to increase or decrease the difficulty. Making it a resource system takes away that option, since now you have to weigh heavily whether you want to use this item, and if you use the item and fail, well, it can become to the point where you don't have enough in order to call the ally to assist you. And the specter that you call isn't that great, but it's the idea that you have some sort of beat stick to help you in fighting the encounter. Either way, I think this should definitely be changed. Now we face the Scrapped Watchmen, and this is definitely a very hard fight. The boss hits very hard, and if you haven't grasped the parrying system yet, you are in for a world of hurt. I honestly feel like they need to make the dodging system a more viable system, similar to the Surge 2, where parrying and dodging were both options in combat. But here it's either parry or nothing. The enemy does have a weak point on its butt, but you can't get it unless you have the Spectre to help, seeing that the enemy is hard locked onto you and there's no way for you to get behind him. The key here is defense and only striking after the pattern has finished. Halfway through the fight, the boss will become electrically charged and much more aggressive, attacking much more violently and faster. It's definitely an intense situation, and I don't know how I really feel about it, because the electrical attacks are unblockable and they can come from almost any angle. It also has a grab attack that basically can one-shot you if you're not careful. But honestly, the fight is definitely intense, but it does highlight a lot of aspects to Lies of P that I feel like definitely needs some improvement and changes. Like I said, the dodging system, and I also feel like the parrying system needs some sort of tuned to the player. Like if you parry, you reduce the damage to 0 and you don't take any damage as opposed to blocking. But I feel like there should be an opposite end to it. Like if you parry perfectly enough that you can knock the enemy off guard, put them into a groggy state, and deliver a fatal blow, similar to Sekiro or from Bloodborne, where if you get a parry, you get a fatal attack, and you can definitely showcase the risk versus reward system. At this point, I just feel like parrying doesn't have as much of an effect that it could have. Once destroyed, you head back to the hotel to learn about Vagini, the manufacturer of the puppets. We are informed that he went to stop the factory from making more, but never came back, and that's where the demo ends, with the developers teasing a morality system where you can invite more survivors back to the hotel, but you need to choose very carefully, similar to Bloodborne, where some of the people you can invite back can actually be devastating to the survivors you keep in that hub area. So that's where the end of Liza P end. Honestly, I really enjoyed the demo, and the game has a lot of promise for someone who's a fan of Bloodborne or even Souls-like games in general. The combat and presentation definitely resembles that of Bloodborne and has its unique take on it. Using Pinocchio as the central figure is pretty amazing, and all the links to the original take are used in a different direction here that help paint a brand new environment and game and experience for you to enjoy. How things may transpire, I don't know if I'm going to be rightfully so in predicting them, such as we find out that, the puppet we're playing is a mix between human and puppet. That's what I'm predicting, that this is actually his son, and he's been reborn as a puppet with using clockwork technology. That's going to be my prediction on it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I'm right, I'm right. I do love Sophia's design and the character models in general, but Sophia in particular definitely comes off as a humble and caring person, similar to the Fire Shrine Keeper from Dark Souls 3, or maybe even the doll from Bloodborne, depending on your preference, but I prefer the Fire Shrine Keeper from Dark Souls 3. The only major issue that I really think needs refinement is the dodging system. It's clear the game wants to encourage parrying above everything else, but limited ground you can cover by dodging is way too small. It just creates this very limited combat system where you're not given the option of whether to dodge or parry. You have to parry. And while I can understand that in a game like Sekiro, in this game I feel like they can have both options, like your cake and eat it too. I think still the best game that ever implemented that type of system would be The Surge, where parrying is encouraged, but you can still use the dodging system if you're not really confident in your parrying, all the way to the final boss where it's still a viable option. Either way, I really enjoyed Liza P, and you can try out the game right now on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. It has definitely a lot of promise, and it's for someone who's been looking forward to a Bloodborne remaster or sequel. This definitely scratches that itch to a large degree. Either way, I enjoyed the game. Tell me what you think about it, if you played it, whether you're interested in playing it. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, subscribe, all that social media stuff. That's me, signing out.